Hi everybody, and welcome to this virtual summit on Mainframe, Mission Essential in the Modern Software Factory, presented by CA Technologies. My name is Jim Malone with IDG, and I'll be your moderator for today's live session. Now, thanks for joining us for these exclusive webcasts covering the latest in mainframe trends in 5 live sessions. Yes, we're live today, and we invite you to take part by sending in questions and comments for our experts by using the Ask a Question section of your web console. You can also live tweet the event using the hashtag Mainframe Summit, and you can watch the live Twitter stream on your console as well. So with that, let's get started with our first session, Built to Change, the Mainframe Future is Now. And we have a panel of experts to help us through this session. I want to welcome first Jamie Thomas. Jamie is General Manager, Systems and Strategies and Development with IBM. Jamie, thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Next is Ashok Reddy. Ashok is General Manager, Mainframe Business Unit with CA Technologies. Ashok, thanks for joining us.
Great to be here.
And finally, Matt Eastwood. Matt is Senior Vice President, Infrastructure at IDC.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks for joining us. And let's start with you, Matt. What's the state of the state? What industry trends are you seeing?
So at IDC, we've really been talking about the industry in terms of how it's been evolving through a lens that we refer to as the third platform. So essentially, the mainframe's been at the center of this from the beginning of our industry. First platform was really defined by mainframe and terminal, and then we evolved and we saw the advent of client server, and then more recently with mobile and cloud. What we are seeing very much is a speed of change happening in the business that we've really never seen. A lot of it extends from what's happening with mobile, what's happening with how we engage with our customers. And the mainframe is really kept up and evolved in a very significant way to continue to be a very important and crucial component of how organizations think about building new applications. So this world that we live in is really being defined increasingly in apps and data. And that is really where a lot of customers are going to innovate and to differentiate in their business. So if we think about digital transformation, we're really thinking about really getting out in front of the potential to be disrupted. And in transforming digitally, it's really about taking existing assets, existing investments that have been made in technology and extending those so that they can take on new purposes. And a lot of what's happening around mainframe is really leveraging the latest and greatest things that are happening in our industry. So being able to take the mainframe and host Java applications, or really extend for the web, or using Linux in new ways. So it really creates an opportunity to extend that system of record, which was really at the center of most businesses, and potentially run analytics right side by side with that system of record, or even the engagement model, the mobile engagement model, side by side as well. So these are pretty significant shifts that are happening, and we do see, the desire for a lot of organizations to increasingly automate how they operate their IT, to become better equipped to deal with the costs of innovation in the data center. So getting that percentage of IT budget that's associated with really keeping the lights on, reducing that, and putting more focus on innovation, and recognizing that the mainframe can be part of that innovation strategy. It's about putting the power of analytics in the hands of of not only the business leaders, but people that are deep down in an organization making decisions much faster. It's also about using analytics in IT as a better way to operate IT. So we're seeing lots of innovation happening there, how you can connect to AI, machine learning, and really bring that onto the platform. And then finally, I think DevOps is an important consideration. You'll hear more about that today as well. It's a different model for how we think about speed and agility in our organizations, how we think about spinning up new applications and bringing those applications to market. And some of the research we'll talk about today very much recognizes the value of this. We're seeing organizations that are embracing this modern mainframe getting some very significant results in terms of revenue, and also that ability to innovate and drive more value over to the innovation side of the equation.
Thanks, Matt. What's really interesting, I'm glad you brought up digital transformation. It's nice to hear the mainframes not being left behind, but it's right in the thick of it, it sounds like, from what you're...
It very much is, and
yeah.
I think that's probably the number one takeaway for today, is that it fits and it can be extended, and there's good value in making that extension.
Yeah. Ashok, one of the one of the big drivers for digital transformation is this shift in IT to a focus on business outcomes. What are some of the business outcomes that your customers should be driving toward?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good question. I think it actually starts with customers who are trying to get into become a digital business. I think in this context, more and more companies are running things 24/7. They're trying to reach customers anywhere, anytime. So I think in that context, I think what we're really talking about here is mission critical applications, because it's really something which almost runs like electricity. People need this running all the time, and needs to be secure. And we also talk about the trust, because I think these are trusted systems. In fact, 49 years ago this month is when the first man on the moon was launched, and that was powered by the first mainframe. And Matt talked about, the mainframe has evolved. So if people can trust mainframe in those days, to launch to the moon, but now I think you're seeing most of the world's businesses, the large businesses to airlines to others, are really depending on mainframe. And in that context, typically I see about 5 things, outcomes, what they're looking for. One is, it all starts with economics, and I think they want to do more with less. I think, it's not, of course it's mission critical, but I want to still be able to shift some of the things I'm doing towards more and more innovation. That's the digital transformation. The second aspect is, how do I get the value proposition of mainframe, which is, I want to be able to run it 100% of the time. And the SLA is what people deal with, right? I mean, you're talking about people's lives here, and you're talking about people using airlines or credit cards. So there is a SLA requirements, and then also people, many times, when you talk about mainframes, the people who have been programming these may be retiring, and you're bringing newer skills into this. So how do we address those issues, right? That's one of the outcome customers are looking at. The other part is really it's about automation. I think Matt talked about how people are looking to automate in the context of the transformation. Automation is key. And in that, how do we go beyond just the basic scripts and other things what people may be using? How do I make it automated end to end? The fourth part of this is really, if I'm running 24/7 mission critical applications, how do we introduce the notion of DevOps into it? So how do we make changes when something is running all the time? You can't just fail fast, right? People hear about fail fast on the cloud, but in this, it's not just about resiliency, but it is also constantly being able to serve. And the last part is about security, because at the end of the day, if you ask customers, they'll say it's job number 1, 2, and 3, and people are being attacked by ransomware. And so if 70 or 80% of the world's enterprise data is on a mainframe, so how do we protect it, whether it's in data in rest or data in motion? So those are some of the outcomes we typically see what customers are trying to achieve with the mainframe.
Yeah, excellent, thank you. You brought up the doing less with more for IT leaders, and that gets us to the cost question. And one of the big cost issues we see at IDG is the legacy infrastructure, making the most of what you have. I don't know, Jamie, do you chafe when people call mainframe legacy? I mean, you've got a...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're talking about the modern mainframe here today.
That's right, exactly. But Ashok, talk about the budgeting. How can IT, how can they grow their budget or free their budget to increase MIPS, for example?
Yeah, no, I think, when you look at the overall infrastructure, there is in the mainframe context, you have hardware, your software, you've got one of the things which gets a mainframe, people think about it as, oh, well, mainframe is expensive, but it's not really when you look at the total cost of ownership. But there is also things like monthly license charge people get onto. Well, I'm paying for something, monthly license charge even after I buy the system. But there are a lot of things IBM has done and you can actually take advantage of, which is, some of the best practices we have seen is, first thing is, you don't need to run everything as the core processor and the mainframe, which kind of leads to your monthly license charge. There are specialty engines like zip engines and others, which you can build applications to take advantage of it. And a lot of us who are developing our software and applications, we are making sure we are supporting the specialty engines, so there is no monthly license charge. You can improve the performance of the applications. You use less MIPS, and as every new mainframe comes in, I mean, it gets better, so that's another aspect. And then the third one is, I think you can also manage the workloads better. I think because mainframe can run very close to 100% availability. In that context, I think many times people are worried about, am I going to exceed this 4-hour rolling average, and how do I manage this across my different LPARs and things like that. But now you have different technologies available to be able to optimize them and manage that. And the last one is really, I think, just from creating automation and leveraging a lot of the things like intelligent automation, others, you can, improve the efficiencies of the system. So there are several of these things which are really, you can manage economics and shift that spend towards newer initiatives or innovations.
Yeah, excellent. Matt or Jamie, feel free to jump in. Anything to add to what Ashok? Yeah.
Just one comment. I think if we think about what's happening in our industry, there's a lot of focus on, so we like to talk about people, process, technology. When I think about people, skills, super important component of this discussion, the modernization of the skill set, the fact that new jobs and new opportunities will emerge for the IT leaders and the IT doers in our industry, and that's an important consideration. Every company becomes a technology company or it really risks failure. So I think that's an important consideration for people to keep in mind. And when you think about it in that context, we're also beginning to see that a significant percentage of customers are recognizing that they need to begin to invest in technology. They need to get out in front of what's happening in the business. It doesn't always work in a perfect hand in glove where what's happening in the business automatically results in something in the infrastructure. What we're seeing is IT leaders are trying to get out in front, transform the infrastructure, and get ready for what will happen in the business, so that when those business conversations happen, you're ready to basically roll and turn it on.
Yeah, excellent. Ashok, you mentioned machine learning and operational intelligence. How are companies leveraging that data for things like self-healing systems?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think there is two aspects of it. One is that I talked about people retiring in terms of skills, but you're getting a lot of new next generation people working on these systems, and it's connected mainframe, so you have much more of a enterprise hybrid cloud type infrastructure. So in this context, I think one of the things we find is that you can take a lot of the data which is on the mainframe related operations and be able to apply machine learning to that, because it's all about machine data. And then if I can learn and be able to say, if I'm running this 100% of the time, and there are certain things which you may want to find if there is something happens, like if I'm a bank, I'm running all my statements at the end of the month, and I know there is going to be a spike. Is it an anomaly or is it going to happen? So you want to start looking at applying machine learning to be able to predict, and is it an anomaly, or find some patterns. And then you kind of lead that to, it's all about, if for example, I know what my rate of storage is getting full. And if that is going to at some point have a problem, do I need to provision extra capacity of storage, or do I need to manage my performance? So it's really looking at end to end, and sometimes humans cannot figure out all the patterns. And we have found that when we take the data from last 2 or 3 months and you run through these things, the machine learning can find out patterns which allows people to prevent the failures from happening in the first place. And it becomes more of a, how do I become more proactive versus being reactive when something happens? And as I said, these things need to be running 100% of the time.
Right, exactly. One of the big drivers for digital transformation is a need for speed, faster time to market, faster innovation, faster app development. Ashok, what can you tell us about that need for speed?
Yeah, I think one misperception is in the industry is that with mainframe, I mean, it's the most reliable system, highly available and secure. But when it comes to, is it built for change? Can I, also introduce agile and others? So I think we actually find that's kind of the reason why people think that way, is because if something is running 24/7, as I said earlier, how do I make a change and deploy it and get feedback in a production environment? And one of the challenges at the root cause of that is, when people develop and test, many times that environment is different than the production environment. So what happens is, when you want to introduce DevOps into mainframe, you have to eliminate that friction between dev, test, and production. So ideally, what the best practices are, you want to make sure that you're provisioning your development test environments very similar to your production environments. So that allows somebody to kind of make sure that when I'm developing and testing, when you deploy, the operations people are not finding new things or something which only we are finding out. So that eliminates that friction, and that becomes what we are calling continuous delivery. So you can now apply continuous testing best practices. You can actually do development in new Eclipse-based IDEs, and so all the modern agile practices can be applied. We ourselves have hundreds of Scrum teams on the mainframe who are doing this. Basically, we are able to release every few weeks. And the way we do it is to look at cycle time at the end to end. What are the type of things, if I make a change, how long does that take to deploy the change? And all the barriers in that, is it taking too long to set up an environment? Is somebody waiting for something? Then you kind of go through and eliminate those things. And so really the DevOps from a mobile to mainframe needs to happen, looking at cycle time and making sure the environments are the same. And then I think in mainframe as now, supports all the other thing that people don't realize is it supports all the latest languages. You can use Java, and many people are kind of, oh, I don't realize I have to only program in COBOL, right? I mean, you can use the Go language, so you are eliminating all those things to really make it truly, mainframe is no different. I can apply the DevOps and Agile principles to develop, deploy, and manage them or any mission critical applications.
I would just add, I think a big piece of the discussion here is really around culture. The mainframe in many organizations was always kind of special. It was off to the side with a special group of people that touched and managed it. And what we're talking about doing is really moving it to the center and culturally recognizing that it's a core component of the infrastructure that's really there to be leveraged in this digital world. So once you start to think that way, then and you start to break some of those barriers down, and I think it really touches a lot with what Ashok was saying about languages and who's going to build applications for this platform. It really has changed significantly from how a lot of people think about it.
Yep.
Yeah, excellent. And before we get to Jamie, we're going to get to you have a big announcement, but Ashok, before we get there, talk about security. I don't want to leave the conversation before we touch on security. What are some of the big concerns there? What are some of the trends that you're seeing?
Yeah, no, I think the security tends to be for our customers, job number one, number two, number three, as I said. It's really, with so much of enterprise data, which I think somebody made a statement that most of the things you can't Google today, only like 10% of the world's data can be Googled. So that means most of it is running on mainframe. So in that context, how do you secure the data? It's all about data-centric security. And there is also lots of personal information in this, right? I think it's basically when you are a credit card processor, or you may be using social security numbers, credit card numbers, everything from IP addresses. And now with the new regulations in Europe and like GDPR and others, it's huge penalties, up to 20 million euros per finding somebody's personal information. And I think that's where I think customers are looking at, what I have on mainframe, I don't know how much of what type of information I have. How do I make sure that if I'm in a particular country in Europe, I don't let the data leave the country? So there are things where you can apply and understand, and we have approaches to kind of classify information. I think there are different sessions today, which one of them is going to cover this personal information, PII, and how do I prevent the data breaches and applying these things. So there is a session more detail. But generally, I think security, yes, mainframe, especially Jamie's going to talk about the next generation. It's the world's best platform for security, but you still have to pay attention to the privacy and all the needs of the users' information somebody's collecting.
Yeah, that's a good chance to bring Jamie into the conversation. Jamie, thanks for joining us. IBM announced recently the Z14, the latest in the Z series mainframe. Talk about it from the business perspective. What are some of the key aspects that you're talking to customers about ROI, business outcomes, et cetera?
Well, Jim, as Ashok and Matt indicated, a lot of our clients are moving to a digital strategy, and as part of that, they're really leveraging these kind of capabilities to create a unique client experience. So what they ask us to do in the context of the Z14 is ensure that we have a trusted environment as we go on this journey, that you, IBM, are going to help us protect our critical assets and our data, most importantly our data. So when we look at the key capabilities of the system, there were 4 main focus areas for us. And number one is this idea of pervasive encryption. The idea that data is the new perimeter, as we've talked about. We have to protect from both outside threats and inside threats. We have to understand how to protect data in motion and data at rest. And as we look at what's happened in the last few years, where we've had like 9 billion records stolen, I think, since 2013, and only 4% of those records were encrypted, our thought is, how do we create an environment with this system that allows our customers to encrypt with confidence, that they know they're going to be able to encrypt everything and get the same performance out of the system? The second area of really that we're really focused on was this idea of continuous intelligence, and I think that Ashok, you alluded to this. What do we need to do to create this environment where machine learning and statistics and analytics is just a normal part of the business that our clients can achieve, that they're able to use these capabilities to optimize their business and actually have much more predictive models, not only from a business perspective, but also how they run the system. And to do this, we've had to add new capabilities, things like the expansion of memory. So we now have the ability to expand up to 32 terabytes of memory to support these new applications, as well as to support things like in-memory databases. The other thing is making sure that we can run modern workloads at a very high rate of speed. So our new innovations have allowed us to create something called Pauseless Java Collection. For those of us who have been in the world of Java for a long time, I didn't think that we'd ever get to a point where we could actually talk about this idea that we actually built into the processor, the idea that you don't have to worry about garbage collection from a Java perspective now. We're just going to enable you to deal with an extensive number of JVMs and an extensive heap size in the context of this continuous intelligence concept. The other idea is that we want a system that is open, right, that allows our clients to create these new cloud models, to create new mobile applications, to tap into the transactional context that resides on the system, create new services more easily. So that's about opening up the system to new workloads, being able to support an extensive number of containers, if you will, and support new workloads like next generation databases, MongoDB and things like that. And last but not least is the question of pricing, which you touched upon, Ashok. So we've implemented this notion of container-based pricing, where we allow clients to more easily co-locate different workloads at a better price point to achieve what they need to from an application dev test perspective at a reduced price, as well as we've also implemented a new payments-based, results-based pricing model as well. So when we think about these four things: pervasive encryption, continuous intelligence, opening up the system, and also a better pricing model. Those are the four main things that we really focused on in this announcement.
The pervasive encryption's got a lot of attention. I want you to talk a little bit more about that, but also talk about where you see your customers on their mainframe journey.
Well, the pervasive encryption is really the hot topic of the day, the week, the year, whatever you want to call it, right? Because we've all continued to see in the press these threats are just continuous and they come in different forms. It just re-emphasizes the idea once again that we have to think about protecting the system from the processor all the way up through all the layers of the system, which is what we've done. This notion that we are protecting data in all its forms, whether it's in a cache, as I said before, whether it's something that's in motion or at rest. And the most innovative contribution we've made to the Z14 is this bulk data encryption, the notion that we can encrypt a data set within the system without changing the applications. Because once again, one of the friction points of only 4% of those records being encrypted is if you have to change the applications to really achieve this, then it's really going to be a mitigating factor in your being able to take advantage of encryption. So we've eliminated that problem, so there should be no excuses. It runs 18 times faster than an Intel-based form factor, so there's no speed impediment here to taking advantage of these encryption capabilities. And that's really what we want to achieve with this. Allow our clients to take advantage of encryption without the other challenges, the impediments from developers and other stakeholders that perhaps were the naysayers in this whole equation previously.
We've heard from Matt and Ashok about the operational intelligence, machine learning, the incursion of DevOps on the mainframe, just the mainframe right in the middle of digital transformation. I'd love to get your take on that, Jamie, and especially what you're hearing from your customers, as they go through their mainframe journey.
Well, clients are, first of all, the clients that rely on our mainframe, and I think we can all throw out statistics, but we really are achieving about 8 trillion in payments every year. We have about roughly 29 billion ATM transactions that we handle every year, 4 billion airline records easily. So we are at the middle of any mission critical operation, and so our clients are really saying, IBM, we want you to continue with that agenda, if you will, but make sure you're adding the innovation that allows us to take this thing into the next century. And that means all the things we need to do to support new workloads like a blockchain, and be able to do that in the context of resiliency as well as security. So when we look at the innovation characteristics of the machine, and actually I wanted to bring the Z14 here, but it does weigh 2,000 pounds, and sadly all the machines I have are in test. We're in the final test, so they're a little bit consumed. But I brought the heart. Right. So this is the heart of the Z14. This is the Z14 processor chip. It is 14 nanometer technology. It's got 10 cores. It's 17 layers of metal. It has 14.1 miles of wiring, 6.1 billion transistors, so it's fairly densely packed. We probably can't see all the transistors here, but it is clearly an innovation, and when we talk about workloads, it is this heart really that is allowing us to accelerate the workloads for the Z14, because we've actually built the logic in here to do those things that we talked about, like pauseless Java collection, the ability to actually do Hoffman level compression technology that we can take advantage of in our DB2 database. And it's the acceleration of this chip, the marriage of that with the workload that's really making a fundamental difference in the innovation we're able to bring to this system. That's why we don't think of it as a legacy system. We do think of it as a system that is tried and true and runs a lot of businesses today, but it's actually the advent of this modern technology for our clients. So we're quite proud of the heart here, even though we couldn't bring the entire system with us.
You brought the important part.
Yes, the heart, and I'll take it with me when I leave.
Although those panels are cool too. So let's look in the crystal ball here for a minute. Jamie, what's the future at IBM? What are you looking for coming up next?
Well, one thing I wanted to mention before I get there, because I did want to tap into this comment about Agile. And I wanted to just have a little press commercial for how we designed the mainframe. Because this is the first mainframe where we really did apply Agile principles and design thinking, and that's how we pulled these threads through the system, if you will, that allowed us to have these complete end-to-end solutions around things like pervasive encryption, from what we did in the chip to what we did through all the layers of the system and into the software layers. And to do that, we executed 500 trillion simulations, where we simulate all of the chip design using our own supercomputer. We simulated the system even before the chip was born, so that we knew that they could come together effectively in the construct of this Agile. We ran 46 Scrum teams for this effort, and it involved over 30,000 Agile stories to have the mainframe system come together. We are truly a system that, we're doing Agile for both hardware and software design, so I think we're a proof point that you can do these modern development concepts and have something like this be the result of what you've achieved. So we're quite proud of that operation and our ability to apply those concepts. When we look at kind of what's next on the horizon, of course we'll continue with our mainframe journey, because I think we're just at the very beginning of things like new workloads around blockchain. I own supply chain and manufacturing for IBM as well, and we're applying blockchain to our manufacturing operations as we ship these mainframe parts from our factory in Poughkeepsie to our factory in Singapore for our Asia operations. We're using blockchain for our import and export declarations, working with the Singapore government. So there's a lot we can do around new workloads. From the rest of our systems agenda, we're really focused on allowing customers to deploy cognitive applications to take advantage of deep learning and machine learning, and both of what we're doing around cognitive systems and storage. And last but not least, and Ashok knows this, my small project that I'm doing outside of the mainframe these days is we're working on quantum computing. So we're working on the commercial quantum computing efforts. You can actually go out and exploit our IBM Q machine, so it's IBM Q, just like we have IBM Z, from a cloud experience, and start to partake and understand what the journey to quantum is going to be about as we go through the future. So I think there's a lot on the horizon, and we're really excited to be here and share with you all these announcements around the IBM Z and Z14 in particular.
Excellent. Ashok, while we're talking about the future, what's next for CA?
Yeah, no, I think we are very excited to partner with IBM on the journey Jamie just went through. I think Z14, I believe, is I think we talked about systems of record in the past, but I think what it does do is provide more of a system of trust for customers. So one of the things we are doing is, apart from helping existing mainframe customers who are looking at the outcomes I talked about, economics and being able to apply machine learning and agility, I think we can almost drive a data center driven by mainframe, what I call a self-driving data center or a mainframe. So just like self-driving cars, so I think we can actually have, with the powerful capabilities what Z14 brings, with some of the technology what CA is introducing around mainframe as a service, so that becomes more like cloud-like, because that's what we hear from customers, where don't make mainframe different. I want to I want to develop, and I want to do the same things I can do in a cloud. So I think it's about almost like a cloud in a box, like in a hyperscale cloud in a box, but it's the most secure platform. It's the complete encryption. And now you also have the latest technologies, like whatever the open source technologies you can use to apply to machine learning, Spark and Z. So what we are enabling is how do we enable that speed and agility with the DevOps, being able to make everything as a service, and then partnering with IBM around how do we provide that sort of a trusted system, including the data privacy. And so we have several sessions today which will cover each of them. One of them is on the business value of the mainframe. I know Matt will be talking to that, and that shows how customers are leveraging today's mainframe. But now if you apply the power of the next generation mainframe, I think you can now think about using that for things like blockchain. Blockchain is systems of trust applied. It's like people talk about it's really about trust economy. Right now, it's all about Internet of Transactions. So people talk about ransomware and other things, but I think if you make mainframe now part of your hybrid cloud infrastructure for encryption, you can really make it as a systems of trust, and not only running your existing workloads, but I think this is the best platform of choice for machine learning and AI plus blockchain. So I think that's really where what we are doing is partnering with IBM on blockchain services, which is now running on mainframes, even for IBM data centers. So mainframe as a service, DevOps, and also economics. So there is one session on DevOps today. We can kind of go into more details. There is a session on security and data privacy, as well as this self-driving data center. So I think there'll be more details on it, but people can find out more details in terms of a roadmap, what we're doing in those spaces.
Excellent, thanks. Matt Eastwood, is it fair to ask you to look into your crystal ball about what's next?
Sure, happy to do that. So to build on that third platform theme earlier, really what we like to say at IDC is a lot of the value that's created in our industry by customers of technology really happens on top of these platforms. So it's how you can apply things like artificial intelligence and cognitive computing, and even things like robotics and 3D printing. So we really look at sort of acceleration layers on top of what we would call this third platform. If I look specifically at the data center, and we were touching on a lot of it, but it's really about we've gone from this phase of really creating a very ultra efficient data center in terms of super dense, increasingly easy to manage. Well, now we're moving to a phase that is much more autonomous. It's also much more defined in software, much more focused on acceleration for applications and really understanding the needs and attributes of applications and bending the price performance curves. I mean, quantum computing is a really interesting thing to think about. You can think about things like even storing data in the form of a DNA strand and the amount of data densities that you can get. I mean, the world is going to change dramatically in the next 10 to 15 years, and we might not even recognize the type of architectures that we're using to really build the platforms to run our applications. And this extends not just for the data center and the cloud, but also the edge. It's all impacted. When we think about digital transformation, we really think about a strategy that's really about a continuum of applications and data that extends from edge to core to cloud. And that's really where customers are going to differentiate, and they have to think about platforms and how the platforms can support that overall vision.
Yeah, Jamie, it must be exciting when we talk about those, quantum computing and the bold predictions for the future. It must be exciting to have the mainframe be right in the thick of that.
Well, we certainly are proud to have been on a journey this long and have a history of building successful applications jointly with our clients and with our partners like yourself. As we look at things like quantum, we absolutely believe that it will be an accelerator to what is already a very tried and true technology that runs the world's transactions today. And so the marriage of quantum with something like what we have in Z14 is really quite interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Excuse me, the numbers that you cited are really staggering, and I think we'll hear later today 70% of businesses' critical information sits on a mainframe. 92 of the top 100 banks mainframe. We know the story here. So in the few minutes we have left, I want to give each of you a chance to kind of wrap up and give the most important takeaways for the folks watching today. And Jamie, let's start with you.
Well, what I would say is that hopefully you've all taken away from this discussion that critical business operations are very important for anyone who really wants to run a successful business. And in today's environment, we increasingly see some naivety in the system, if you will, around what's really required to do this. And what we're suggesting that is you really do have to think about these critical issues around pervasive encryption, protecting your data assets, your most business critical assets, and making sure that you put an architecture in place, a next generation architecture that allows you both flexibility and achievement of business outcomes, but with the right forethought around trust and some of these critical issues.
Excellent, thanks. Matt Eastwood, top takeaways for the audience from your perspective.
So I think if probably anybody watching or listening to this is thought about security as a top consideration, and anytime an analyst, anytime anybody talks to a customer, security is a top consideration. I would just say, I think that notion of encryption and persistently encrypting is really critical, because what it allows the customer to do is not think about where they're applying encryption, because a lot of time goes into that, and that's really time that's not beneficial to the end result. But applying it everywhere, and when you do that, then you really are starting to achieve some of the benefits of the promise of really operating digitally. It's recognizing that data is pervasive, data is at the edge, in the core, in the cloud, and to the extent that you can begin to lock that down and really create a system of trust, I think there's tremendous value there.
Do you find that security message is resonating with the folks you're talking to?
I mean, it is. I mean, anytime you ask a customer what their top challenge or consideration is, security's almost always at the top of that list. So that is something that they're looking to solve and looking for ways to enhance. And I think the recognition is that it's not one single solution. It takes, security is something that really has to be solved in multiple dimensions, but this is one component of that solution.
Yeah, Ashok, main takeaways for the audience today.
Yeah, no, I think, the theme of this, it was really about build to change. So if I have to say, the key theme for me is, it was 50 years ago, the first ATM was introduced in New York City, in fact. And so you think about 24/7 banking started 50 years ago. It was running on a mainframe. This past week, the Wall Street Journal announced a new next generation ATMs many of the banks are introducing. What they do is they use your smartphone. They don't use a debit card. You actually use a phone or authentication, face recognition to log in. But those things are being built on the mainframe, on the back-end system. So it's sort of, think about an application written 50 years ago is still running. And when people talk about legacy, that's what they're referring to. But it's actually a great system where it allows you to run something built 50 years ago. But if I write something today, I know it can run next 50 years. Which other system can be really truly built to change, right? So to me, from that perspective, I think it's truly a built to change system. So I think it's about perception. For those of you who are a mainframe audience, people who are on the mainframe side of the house, you get asked, why are we running on a legacy system? It's not really a legacy system. It just supports a legacy system so that your investments are protected, but also it gives you a way to build next generation applications like blockchain and machine learning, AI, which is the future. So that's, to me, is the theme. I mean, it's a build to change system, and we are happy to partner with IBM to provide the best solution possible to make this happen.
Excellent, thanks. And with that, we're just about at the end of our time for this session. I want to give a big thanks to Jamie Thomas, Ashok Reddy, and Matt Eastwood. Thanks for your insights and expertise. This has been really, really interesting. Great session. I also want to make sure that you stay with us. After this short break, we'll be back with our next session on protecting PII, data-centric security, and the mainframe.